We'll go on with the November lecture. We couldn't start to talk about the uses of sesame oil. Today we'll talk about uses of sesame oil, wax, and fats used by Sumerians. Sumerians used sesame oil for various purposes. They used it for food instead of olive oil because they didn't have any olive oil trees. So they were only using sesame oil. And they made, of course, soap. And they also made medicine, perfumes, burial ceremonies. When somebody died, they rubbed the body of the dead person with the sesame oil. And they also used it as fuel for the instead of candles. They used for the small lamps, kandil in Turkish. So it was very popular, an important ingredient for Sumerians. Now, of course, when something is used commonly by everybody, the kings, like today the presidents in various countries, they try to keep the price of that material low. And we see that Sennacherib, he was a Neo-Assyrian emperor in Mesopotamia. After, as I said, there were many city kingdoms and Sumerians. Sometimes they got together, but they always had wars between them. And they all broke up after a while. So he was attempting to grow olive trees, but he didn't have a chance because the climate was not suitable to grow olives. As you know, most of the olive oils, oil trees are grown in around Mediterranean in warm climates, but not in Mesopotamia. So they were all dead. All the trees were dead. This is the picture of Sennacherib, which is a carving on a rock. It's in Cizre. I don't know, is there anyone from Cizre or around Cizre, or anyone has seen Cizre? So when you visit there, maybe you can go and see the silhouette of Sennacherib. He was the king around 745 to 681 BC. This is a rock relief. Rock relief, as you know, is different than statue. You have statue is three-dimensional, but relief is partly three-dimensional, partly two-dimensional. It's a very common way of depicting the kings and some of the important activities in the country during in Mesopotamia and also in Egypt. King Sargon II, who was the father of Sennacherib, he also tried to keep the price of sesame and sesame oil as many other kings. And he said, because of the importance of sesame oil, price control was necessary, that the oil of abundance, which eases the muscles of man, should not be too costly in my land. Sesame was sold at the same price of other grains. So there were other grains, barley, maybe some wheat. But as you can see, he emphasizes on not sesame being a food ingredient, but he's more interested in the muscles of the man. He says it eases the muscle of man. That's why I try to keep the price low. But anyway, he tried to keep the price low. This is the relief of Sargon II. It's in Iraq Museum. As I mentioned before, all the kings tried to keep the price of sesame low because, as I said, it was one of the essential materials that everyone needed, everyone used. If you look at the bottom of the slide, I mentioned about the prime minister around 70s. They used to say, Gaza, Tuza, Beze, Zam yok. We will not increase the prices of gas. When they say gas, it's not natural gas. In those days, the people used to use gasoline. Gasoline is something like between fuel that we use in cars or aeroplanes. So it was used at home. We didn't have any natural gas in those days. So it was a liquid fuel where they used in kitchens. Have you any one of you seen one of those equipments that burn the gasoline? Var mı gaz ocağı gören? Gaz ocağı. You can see it in our museum. Probably they all are extinct now because nobody uses gazia anymore. It's like kerosene. So in order to keep the people calm, the prime minister said that I will not increase the price of kerosene, I will not increase the price of salt, I will not increase the price of clothing because you had to wear something. Therefore, he assured the people that there will be no price increases. Just like today, they try to keep the prices of certain things as low as possible. But of course, they cannot succeed not only in Turkey, but in many countries. So politicians are interested in keeping the prices low, but it's not always in their hand. Okay. Now, we see various names about sesame oil. In Sumerian language, it's called iagis. In Akkadian language, it is called ellu. The oil of the first pressing, just like the quality of olive oil that we use today. So oil of the first pressing, I'll talk about what it is. And in Sumerian language, it is iagis sak. In Akkadian, ri-es-tu-u. And there are other types of olive oil. There's filtered oil, sweet oil, honeyed oil, best sesame oil. So as I wrote here, the capital letters are Sumerian. The small letters are Akkadian. Sesame seeds contain about 45 up to 50% oil, and they also contain 15% protein. So that's why it was a very good food for Sumerians and people in Mesopotamia, because you get your oil, need of oil, and also as well as protein. So it was used, as I mentioned, for medicine, making soap, oiling the leather of door hinges. In those days, they didn't have doors like this. They used leather for the door as hinges, menteşe. And they also used, as the king mentioned, to soften the muscles of man and rubbing the bodies of corpses. And they added sesame oil to wine or beer, perhaps to make it, I don't know, easy to drink or something. I don't know if I mentioned that in even Middle Ages, people added water to wine. Did I mention that? Yeah. In order to protect themselves from bacteria, because the water, drinking waters and all the waters, mostly they were contaminated by bacteria or viruses or whatever. So they had to protect themselves by adding some alcohol so that they could kill the bacteria, harmful bacteria. Okay, they also use for caulking. Caulking is kalafatlam. Did I mention that before? Yeah, okay. For the boats, when you have a wooden boat, you have to seal the boat so that you prevent the leaking of water into the boat by mixing the oil and some textile or some cotton material. In those days, of course, they didn't have, they had cotton much less than wool, so wool was more popular. And as I mentioned before, it was used as fuel for the lamps, and they also use oil tanning. When they tan the leather, there is oil tanning, because when you rub oil to a leather, it's not the leather, to the skin of animal, hide of animal, then you replace the water. If you remember that, you replace the water with oil, therefore you prolong the lifetime of the leather. Yeah, they also used it for polishing gold or silver, the metals, and they also oiled the molds when they were going to cast some metals in order to remove them easily. oiled the surface of the mold. And also the grindstone, değirmen taşı. So you have two cylindrical rocks, and you put your sesame in between. As you rotate, you can obtain sesame oil or other oils today. Now this is the kind of lamp that they use, kandil. You fill it with the oil and then you burn with a small string. They also use animal fat, of course, like we do today, along with the oil, sesame oil, for various purposes, just like oil for tanning and medicine, etc. There is a tablet which mentioned the use of fat of kidney of a ram, of an animal, and also fat from the eye of a sheep, fat of bird, fat of black snake, fat of lion, fat of ox. So when they used various materials as medicine, they thought that if they used the fat of various animals, could be better. Just like koca karı ilacı, you mix maybe 10, 20, 30 different plants to make a medicine because you don't know which one actually will be active. Therefore, they did the same thing. They mixed they used various oil, fats in medicine, hoping that one of those fats would be much better for treating the patient. Yeah, there is a clay tablet which mentions about kidney fat to make a soap, by mixing it with ash. There's a clay tablet on that. Now, a clay tablet gives us the formula of a medicine. It says, fat from the sheep of kidney, or sheep's kidney, ash, sweet-smelling plant, probably myrrh or myrrh. We don't know the word exactly, but it represents something like myrrh or something that smells well. And you will apply for his seat, he will be cured. So it's like basur ilacı. It's a medicine for the seat of the person. Buyurun. Günaydın, gel bakalım. Now, there is a tablet about the burial. It says, his corpse was prepared for burial. Clean garments, white linen, bright white stones, precious stones with fine sesame oil on his corpse. Good sesame oil they poured like water on his corpse, fallen to the ground. So we can see that they robbed the body of the dead man, probably the king or a rich man. Also here, I'm sure that they did not care so much about that person, ordinary person, probably a king or prince or a very rich person. So they used it for the burial. There is a good ceremony. And another one says, the enemies will flee like oil from water. So they knew the principle of water not mixing with oil. And they mentioned it in a clay tablet. Because they tried to mix oil. Even today, if you try to mix oil with water, you cannot. So you have to use a mediator to make sure that you can mix, because in certain medicines you use both water solution and oil. So you use a certain compounds to make sure that the two phases mix. Do you remember the name of the material that they use to mix water phase with oil phase? No. Today, there's a name of a chemical or compound, group of chemicals. Phase transfer. Huh? Phase transfer. No, the material that they use. General name of materials. Okay, let's see if you can find out next time. Okay. Now, in those days, of course, there were some slaves during all empires. Today, of course, there are no slaves in the world, but in those days, every country had slaves, because when they had war with another country, they captivated the people there and brought them as slaves to their country, the women, men, and children. So they work for them without any salary. They just work, they just gave them some food and a dirty place to live and sleep. So they had to work all day long. If they died, that they didn't matter. So there is an interesting statement here. It says, the statement about illiterate captive workers. So they consider themselves literate because they can read and write. Of course, if they didn't, so we didn't have this clay tablet. And it's about illiterate captive workers who were building a palace for the king of Sennacherib. This is the statement. It says, to their ignorance and lack of knowledge, they, the ignorant captive workers, drank sesame oil and wore sheepskin to carry on the work. So the Sumerians, they were wearing nice clothes, textiles, but they were surprised that the people who came down from a country above a mountain, so they were mountain men, they were wearing sheepskin, and then they didn't know what to do with the oil. They thought it was something drink. They drank the oil on the table. Bunu görünce hep aklıma bir hikaye geliyor, onu anlatayım. İşte Amerika'ya gidiyorduk bir şeye, böyle bir grup, galiba Türk Günü yürüyüşü var. İşte birkaç rektör, bazı belediye reisleri, işte bazı valiler, bir iki de bakan, galiba CHP'li bir bakandı. Bir uçak dolusu gidiyoruz. Uçağa yiyecekler geliyor. Tabii değişik şehirlerin belediye başkanları var. İşte uçakta biliyorsunuz, bir kısmınız biliyordur zaten. Yemek dağıtıldığında orada salataya dökmek için şey var. Küçük paket, içinde yağ ve sirke olabiliyor. Adam bütün yemekleri yedi. Tam benim elimde 2 tane ama gariban, yani böyle herhalde küçük bir kasabanın belediye başkanları. Konuşmadan belli oluyor. Adam kesti onu, içti. Yanındaki içme lan, içme dedi. O dedi ya dedi. So same thing happened even in modern times. Okay. About the slave girls, there is a clay tablet. They always write something about the slaves. It says 12 quarters of ash, that's Sora, 6 quarters of cypress, and 6 quarters of sesame oils for the washing stone of the slave girls. So probably they provided oil and ash to the girls to wash something. We see that they use 2 kinds of oil for washing. So it seems that they made primitive soap. Now, usually they use the ash of uhulu plant, which is deniz börülcesi. Deniz börülcesi biliyorsunuz biz bugün yiyecek olarak kullandığımız bir şey. O zaman o bolca yetişiyor. Onu yakıp onun külü herhalde daha zengin, potasyumca, sodyumca sabun olarak tercih ediliyor. Okay. You know Epic of Gilgamesh Destanı. Did I mention it before? Gilgamesh Destanı. Okay, next time maybe you should read Gilgamesh Destanı or Gilgamesh, Epic of Gilgamesh. I will give some small fractions of the Gilgamesh epic. There are many stories. Actually, Gilgamesh was supposed to be a king. And somehow somebody named Enkidu, something like animal-shaped crazy man, he looked like animal, and he was sent by gods. Gods were, God Ea was angry at the king, and he wanted to punish him by creating something like Ea, something Enkidu. And but this mentions that they became friends afterwards. So it says, clean oil, pure oil, which provides the gods with luxury, oil which softens the muscles of man, oil of spell of God, Ea, see, spell of God, Tanrı'nın işte bir belası, bir büyüsü. Oil of spell of God, Ea, oil of the spell of God, Marduk, so 2 gods, Marduk and Ea. Oil of the spell of God, Marduk, I have richly supplied the sesame oil of pacification, which the god Ea gave for quieting. So he says, this sesame oil is given to us by God for softening the muscles and quieting the people. And he says, I have anointed, kutsamak, you with the oil of life or sesame oil as an ointment. So it changed Enkidu, the animal like a human being, into a human being. So even this epic of Gilgamesh mentions that olive oil is something magical, such an important material. It even changes the shape and the attitude of an evil creature like Enkidu. So they became friends. Enkidu was the enemy of the king, Gilgamesh, but they became friends because of sesame oil. Now, this is a fraction of the clay tablet, which explains certain parts of the epic. Here you can see there are several lines, and there are several texts. Not only not only this king and Enkidu, but there are many other explanations, like the big flood, Tufan. It's also mentioned in Gilgamesh, Epic of Gilgamesh, Tufan. So when the Epic of Gilgamesh was translated to English and other languages, and it actually shook some religious people, some Christians and some Jewish people, because some of the stories existing in Bible and Torah of the Jewish people looked very similar to Gilgamesh epic, like big flood, Tufan, etc. Some of the stories were very similar, and they said, "So what? Is our Bible a copy of Epic of Gilgamesh?" So there was some struggle, but then they quieted down. Now, they produced the sesame oil, just like the production of obtaining oil in our days. Of course, they use more primitive instruments. They use pressers. In clay tablets, we see that the word amel ni sur mes, which means oil presser. So there was a man who pressed the oil somehow. And another one, it says, let them extract the juice from the sesame before you and let them press before you. So we see that they obtain some sesame oil before pressing. Just like olive oil today. Does anyone know how they produce olive oil today? Or why they classify olive oil? Sızma, birinci, ikinci, üçüncü. Anyone knows anything about olive oil? Yok mu hiç Egeli? Yok kimse galiba Egeli. Okay. So, just like olive oil, they obtain some sesame oil before even pressing. And also we know that when you obtain olive oil or sesame oil, you put hot water to obtain more olive oil. But we use something else in modern times to get the very small amount of olive oil left after pressing or using hot water. Does anyone know anything? Has anyone seen olive oil factory? They use an organic compound. They use the organic solvent, extract every single molecule almost of olive oil, and then they evaporate the organic solvents and reuse it hundreds of times because nothing happens to the organic solvent. Then they obtain all the oil. But of course, normally people prefer the first pressing. Okay, why don't you try to find out what that solvent is, organic solvent is? well known. I'm sure you may have used in organic chemistry laboratory. So we also say that Sumerians extracted some sesame oil before pressing. What they do is that you put it in a big bag, hang it out, it drips by itself. Same thing in the olive oil. They hang it up, and then the drips, the first one, that's called sızma, and then they press. So when they obtained it after pressing, still some oil is left in sesame seeds. Then they added hot water to remove almost all of it. But of course, still, since they didn't know how to use some organic solvents, they didn't have those solvents. So some sesame oil was left in sesame seeds after hot water, even hot water. So originally, the slave girls were using the presses to obtain the oil. If you remember that when we talked about beer, we said the first beer was produced by women at home, and then they were running the beer houses. After that, the men took over from women. So same again, slave girls were pressing the oil, but later on, it became a job for men. Lonca birlik demek yani. Hani lonca oluşuyordu işte. Demirci loncası, yok bilmem marangoz loncası, birlik aralarındaki dernek gibi bir şey. So there's a clay tablet. It's a letter that shows how the owners of sesame production plants forced workers to work under very hard conditions, just like in Middle Ages and even today in some developing countries. So the bosses always force the workers to work more and more. They don't care what happens to them. So it's like torturing. So people are same all the time. The attitude doesn't change. Rich people want to earn more money, and the workers, they cannot go away because if they go out, they cannot find another job. Now, even today, we see that in small towns, in developing countries, they crush sesame seeds in mortars and filter the oil to consume in their houses. And larger production is made in much bigger mortars, and animals or cows or camels are used. So you have a big mortar. A man cannot use the pestle because it's too heavy for him. Then they use animals. So since it's a bigger production system, they sell it. Of course, it's not for themselves, but they sell it. But primitive way of obtaining. Now, there are videos. In the next slide, I'll show you how they use animals to produce sesame oil. This is a photograph which shows a camel running around the container where the sesame seed is being forced and crushed. This is another one. Now let's see if we can watch the video.
Gözlerini neden bağlıyorlar hocam? Gözlerini neden bağlıyorlar?
Sağa sola dikkati dağılmasın, kaçmak istemesin. Her yerde bu yapılan bir şey yani. Gözünü bağlarsın ödü. Tabii kuyudan su çeker, harmanda çalışır. Bizimkiler de bağlar. Now you see, he collects the oil from the surface. Then, of course, he will filter it. This is, of course, from India, as you can see easily. In India, they do not eat the meat of oxes or cows, but they use them as workers. Because they think that cows and bulls are sacred, just like God. But they don't mind. Can anybody explain why they had the stone there? Any explanation why they put that stone there? Sorun değil, atabilirsiniz kafadan. Bir tahmin yürütelim.
Acaba dengeyi kursun diye mi? Yatay bir direk var, altında bir ağırlık var. Hem bassın hem dengeyi kursun.
Okay, one for balance and for something is more important. Look at the shape of the mortar and the pole up there. This one, it is bended, so you have to apply pressure. So when you put the rock, it forces the iron rods onto the sesame. So that creates the pressure. So it's like a conical. So you have the sesame here and the rod here. So you have sesame all over, as you can see, it climbs up to the walls of, and then he pushes the sesame back in. So this creates the pressure. So sesame is crushed here and here, okay? So you have to apply force. You see, he wipes up because the seas between the rod and the container or the mortar climbs up. So he forces them back. Görüyorsunuz ne kadar pis koşullarda elde ediliyor. Onu da çok güzel, bu fabrika değil işte, köyde elde yapılmış diye daha değerli sanıyoruz ama işte koşullar böyle, bazılarını da göreceksiniz yani, bayağı pis yani. Kullandığı tenekeye bak ya, pasta tenekenin içine alıyor ya. Tabii hayvan yere pislik yapıyor, onu temizliyor, elleri pislikle bulaşıyor gene. Onlar için pek önemli bir şey ifade etmiyor. Etraftaki koşullara da bakarsanız temiz hiçbir şey yok. Yani çadır madır gibi her yer. Temiz hiçbir şey yok. No hygiene. Herhalde bitiyor. Bitmesi de durduralım. Ya da bilmiyorum, ileride hatırlamıyorum. İleride önemli bir şey var mı? Yok. Bakalım. No. Okay. Okay. Now, this is a modern factory in China. That's how it shows us how they use these presses, all under perfect conditions, very clean, and everything was disinfected. Let's see that video also. See the difference. You saw the filter. They pour the sesame seeds. Everything is stainless steel. You see the lines there. There, the oil will leak out. Another filter. You see the sesame oil coming out, and it's collected in a container underneath, and then they collect it, and of course they will filter it again, because some small particles there, they use much finer filter afterwards. Now they will increase the pressure. They stopped applying pressure. Now you will see what's left is from sesame, a hard material, cake, they call it cake. Same in sunflower oil or olive oil. That's the cake. He'll just take it out. Because it was very high pressure. That cake is used for food for animals. It's sent to the factories where they produce animal feed. Okay. I don't know if I think I didn't, but here we have a barley, 1 shekel. There are 180 barleys. This is the mass of this barley total is about 1 shekel, 180 grains of barley. Did I mention karat? I think I forgot to mention, maybe later on I will. The mass they used was shekel, that's 180 grains of barley, but there is another unit that we call karat. Does anyone know what karat is? The girls would know better than boys. Karat. We don't say karat, but karat. There is a Turkish word for that. When you buy gold, what does it mean when they say it's 12, 14, 18, or 24? What's the unit that we use in Turkish?
Ayar.
Ayar.
Altın için ayar.
18 ayar, 12 ayar, 14 ayar. Do you know what 18 ayar or 18 karat or
Saflığına göre değil mi?
Yeah, but do you know what it means? Why is 12, 14, 24, 6, 8? Do you know what it means? Where does this ayar comes from? I will talk about karat yet, but let's at least first to understand the classification of gold on the markets. Any suggestion? But
Tek başına galiba tam böyle sert olmuyor. Onun içine
ama rakamlar nereden çıkıyor?
saflığını gösterdiğini gibi.
En safı kaçtı? Which one?
24 değil mi?
24. Karat gold means pure gold. So what do you think if I say 12 karat? 24 is pure. How about 12? Does it mean anything to you when I say 12 karat gold? Hadi arkadaşlar. 24 tam ise 12 kaç? He?
Yarısı saf, yarısı
Yeah,
başka bir şey.
50%. So they add some copper and some silver. But the amount of gold is only 50% when we say 12 karat. When you say 6 karat, that means 1/4, right? So you can write down the carats. Var mı hatırlayan ne geliyor 24'ten aşağıdan kaç var?
22,
22,
18, 14.
18, 14. Bunun aşağısı da var.
Onun aşağısını bilmiyorum.
Bak zenginler böyle oluyor. and what's further? They sell also. This is not the last one. Very common. 14 karat is very common, but there are others. Yok mu? 6, 6, 8, maybe 12. But mainly these are the major ones actually. Okay, but this karat, this is in Turkish karat. But when you say karat, do you know what karat is? It's not for gold. It's for some another valuable material.
Tahta için
Huh?
kullanılmıyor
Yeah,
mu karat?
for diamond. What does it mean?
O da kesim ve parlaklığına göre.
Gramaja göre değil mi?
Yeah. So if I say it's 5 karat, what does it mean 5 karat? Hiç duymadık mı? Öyle olsa 1 gram derler. The answer is here. 1 seed is 1 karat. 1 seed, the mass of 1 seed is 1 karat.
Gerçekten mi?
Yeah.
Ben çok şaşırdım.
Huh?
Çok şaşırdım.
It's seed of what? Kim söyledi keçi boynuzu? Ya. Karip. Karip. Karat oradan geliyor. Karip. Karip. Keçi boynuzu. Sen Güneyli misin?
Yok.
Keçi boynuzu sever misin? Herhalde.
Hocam bitkinin yani
Keçi boynuzu çekirdeği.
hepsi mi aynı geliyor?
Yok canım tabii. Kral ne derse o diyor ki budur kardeşim diyor. Öyle gidiyor. Değişiyor tabii ki. Tabii. Arpa da değişiyor. Ülkeden ülkeye, tarladan tarlaya değişiyor. Ama diyorlar ki bu böyledir. Ona eşit işte metalden şeyler yapıyorlar, gramajlar. Bu böyledir. Şehirden şehire, köyden köye. Osmanlı'da da öyleydi. Arşın diyor. İyi de kardeşim nerede bunun aslı? Değil mi? O da değişiyordu yani. Mesafeler değişiyordu. Yani ne zamanki desimal sisteme geçtik tabii dünyanın her yerinde aynı.
Büyük oranda benzerdir yani çeviri.
Tabii yani biraz yukarı biraz aşağı. Tabii bugün öyle tartmıyor. Şimdi gramla tartıyor. 0,2 gram. Yazdım mı ben? Okay, 0.2 grams.
Hocam o zaman
5 karat 1 gram oluyor.
Anlayamadım.
Ben 5 karat 1 gram dediğimde öyle olsa 1 gram derler dediniz ama 0,2 gramsa 1 karat, 5 karat 1 gram oluyor.
Evet.
Bana hayır dediniz de o yüzden.
Yok,
Hayır,
birisi
bir karata 1 gram diye anladım ben.
Ha, yok.
1 karat 1 gram değil. Tabii bugün işte grama çevriliyor tabii. Bugün kimse keçi boynuzunun çekirdeğini kullanacak halimiz yok tabii. Gram kullanıyoruz. So in the old days, the measures were based on the materials they had around, like the cubit, you see, from the tip of the middle finger to the elbow. It's 50, they say 52 cent, but who says so? Somebody has 49, 48, 53, depending on the person. If you have a tall person, it may be 54. If you have a short person, it may be 42, 44. But that's okay. Usually, they said this is the length of the king or the emperor from tip to the elbow.